The sand pit behind the training barracks was already alive with noise when she stepped onto it. Boots shuffled, gravel crunched, a ring of bodies formed instinctively, uniforms dust-stained, sleeves rolled, faces hungry for distraction. Sparring day always drew a crowd. Pain was entertainment here. Weakness was currency. She adjusted the strap of her gloves and rolled her shoulders once, slow and deliberate. Her name was Avery Kolu, officially just another enlisted operator candidate assigned to a joint training detachment. Unofficially, she was the one everyone watched a second too long, the only woman in the pit, the quiet one, the one who never complained, never bragged, never explained herself, and that, apparently, made her fair game. "Let's go," the instructor barked. No medals, no mercy. Her opponent stepped forward with a grin already carved into his face. Petty Officer Grant Hollis, bigger, louder, popular, the kind of man who believed strength was measured by how many people you could intimidate into silence. He cracked his neck and looked her up and down like she was a bad joke someone told him without permission. "Try not to tap out too fast," he said, just loud enough for the circle to hear. A few snickers followed. Avery didn't respond. She met his eyes once, expression unreadable, then shifted into stance. The whistle blew. Hollis came in hard, too hard, a bull rush disguised as confidence. He grabbed for her collar, trying to muscle her down, but she slipped sideways, feet light, balance perfect. The move earned a few surprised murmurs from the ring. Hollis frowned. That didn't last long. On the next exchange, he fainted low and surged up, wrapping his arm around her neck. It wasn't clean, it wasn't controlled. It was a choke born of ego, forearm crushing against her throat, bicep locking tight. The air left her lungs in a sharp, involuntary gasp. Got her. Someone laughed. Hollis tightened his grip, dragging her backward, boots carving lines through the sand. His breath was hot against her ear. He wanted the crowd to see this, to remember it. Still good. He muttered, mocking. The instructor didn't intervene. Not yet. Sparring was about stress, about breaking comfort. About seeing who panicked. Avery's vision narrowed at the edges. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears, loud and steady. Pain flared along her neck where the pressure bit in, but panic never came. Instead, something colder settled in. She planted her feet. The crowd noticed the change before Hollis did. Her hands didn't claw at his arm like most trainees would. They slid, calm, precise, one checking position, the other anchoring against his wrist. Her breathing slowed, shallow but controlled, even as the choke tightened. Hollis laughed again, confident. "Go on," he said. "Tap." She didn't. Seconds stretched. The sand pit seemed to quiet, the earlier noise thinning into uneasy silence. Someone shifted their weight, another stopped smiling. Hollis felt it then, the resistance, not frantic, not desperate, solid. "What?" he started. Avery spoke for the first time. Her voice was roughened by pressure, but it didn't shake. "Don't forget who I am." It wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. Something in her tone, flat, certain, sent a ripple through the circle. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. Hollis scoffed, tightening his arm again, jaw clenched. "You're done." But Avery's feet shifted, heel digging into the sand. Her spine straightened against his chest, posture suddenly unyielding, like steel finding its shape. She adjusted her grip by a fraction, exactly where it needed to be. The instructor's eyes narrowed. This wasn't resistance anymore. It was preparation. Avery's gaze lifted, unfocused now, not on the crowd, not on the pit, but somewhere inward, counting, measuring, waiting. The choke was still there, the pain was real, but she had been here before, worse than this. Places where panic meant death and calm meant survival. Hollis grunted as her weight shifted again, subtle but wrong, pulling him just slightly off balance. "Break it," someone muttered. The whistle stayed silent. The moment stretched, taut as a drawn wire, and somewhere deep beneath the sand, beneath the noise and the watching eyes, something dangerous woke up. Something trained not just to endure, but to end fights decisively. Part 1 ended with Avery still in the chokehold, but the fight had already changed. Hollis felt it before he understood it. A shift, not forceful, not dramatic, just wrong. The kind of wrong that made experienced fighters uneasy, the way a floor feels different just before it gives way. His arm was still locked around Avery's neck, pressure steady, textbook enough to impress the casual observer. But Avery was no longer where he thought she was. Her center of gravity dropped an inch. Maybe less. Her hips rolled subtly, aligning beneath her shoulders. One foot slid back, heel biting into the sand like an anchor. The movement was economical, almost lazy. The crowd leaned in. "Why isn't she tapping?" Someone whispered. Hollis frowned, irritation creeping in. He flexed his arm harder, forearm grinding against her throat. "This is over," he growled, breath sharp now. "Just quit." Avery inhaled, short, controlled, through her nose. The pain flared white, hot for a split second, then dulled into something distant. Her pulse slowed, the world narrowed. This wasn't sparring anymore. This was a mistake. Her left hand clamped down on his wrist, thumb finding the seam between tendon and bone. Her right elbow tucked tight, then drove backward, not to strike, but to create space, just enough, exactly enough. Hollis grunted, surprised. Before he could react, Avery stepped through. Her hips turned sharply, spine twisting as she ducked under his arm. The choke broke, not violently, but decisively, air rushing back into her lungs as she rolled forward and dropped her weight. Hollis stumbled, dragged off balance by momentum he'd created himself. What the Avery didn't let him finish. She pivoted on the ball of her foot and reappeared at his side, hands already moving. One hooked behind his knee, the other shoved against his shoulder. Not hard, just guided. Gravity did the rest. Hollis hit the sand on his back with a thud that knocked the breath out of him. The sound rippled through the pit. A few soldiers swore under their breath. Avery followed him down. She dropped to one knee beside his head, forearm sliding across his jawline, pressure precise and merciless. Her other hand trapped his wrist, twisting it inward until his shoulder screamed in protest. "Stop!" Hollis gasped, panic finally cracking his voice. The crowd went silent. Avery leaned in, close enough that only he could hear her. Her breathing was steady now, controlled, calm. "I warned you," she said quietly. Hollis thrashed, trying to buck her off, but every movement only tightened the hold. His strength, so useful moments ago, worked against him now, muscles straining into angles they weren't meant to endure. The instructor stepped forward, hand halfway to the whistle. Then he stopped, because Avery hadn't finished. She shifted her grips, smooth, practiced, and transitioned, rolling her weight across Hollis's chest. Her knee pinned his arm. Her forearm slid under his chin again, this time from the front, her bicep locking tight. A choke, clean, controlled, perfect. The difference was unmistakable. Hollis's eyes widened as the pressure set in, efficient and absolute. This wasn't rage, this wasn't ego. This was someone who knew exactly how long it took for consciousness to slip away. Tap. Avery said, no mockery, no anger, just fact. Hollis slapped the sand with his free hand, frantic now. Once, twice, the whistle shrieked. Break. The instructor shouted. Avery released instantly and stood, stepping back as if nothing unusual had happened. Hollis lay there, coughing, sucking air like a man pulled from deep water. His face burned red, then pale. The ring of soldiers stared. No one laughed. Avery adjusted her gloves, rolled her shoulders again, and waited. The instructor approached slowly, eyes locked on her. That was advanced, he said carefully. "Where'd you learn that transition?" Avery met his gaze. For the first time, something flickered behind her eyes. Not pride, not defiance, but warning. "On the job," she replied. The instructor studied her a moment longer, then nodded once. "You good to continue?" She glanced down at Hollis, who wouldn't meet her eyes, then back at the instructor. "Yes, sir." A murmur rolled through the pit. Whispers, side glances, recalculations. Hollis was helped to his feet, shaken and quiet. His earlier confidence, gone like it had never existed. He didn't say a word as he backed out of the circle. Avery stood alone now, the sand untouched beneath her boots. Somewhere in the crowd, someone muttered, "Who the hell is she?" Avery didn't answer. She didn't need to, because the message had landed, and the day was far from over. The pit didn't erupt the way it usually did after a takedown. There was no cheering, no hooting, no exaggerated laughter to bleed off nerves. There was only silence. Avery stood where she was, boots half, buried in sand, chest rising and falling at a measured pace. The scrape on her neck burned now that the adrenaline had ebbed, a thin line of red against sun. Warmed skin, but she didn't touch it. Pain acknowledged was pain controlled. Around her, the circle had subtly changed shape. No one leaned forward anymore. No one smirked. A few soldiers had unconsciously taken a step back, like animals sensing a shift in hierarchy they didn't have words for. Hollis sat on a bench at the edge of the pit, head bowed, forearms resting on his knees. He hadn't spoken since the choke released. He hadn't looked at her either. The laughter that once followed him like a shadow was gone, replaced by something brittle and quiet. The instructor cleared his throat. "All right," he said, voice deliberately neutral. "Reset. New pairing." No one volunteered. Eyes darted. Weight shifted. A few men suddenly found reasons to adjust their gloves or ready boots that had been perfectly fine moments ago. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was recalibration. The mental math of risk versus pride had changed. The instructor noticed. His gaze swept the group, then returned to Avery. "You," he said, pointing. "Stand by." She nodded once and stepped out of the pit, moving to the edge with the same unhurried composure she'd shown throughout. She took a knee, resting her forearms on her thighs, eyes forward. To anyone watching, she looked like she always did, focused, contained, unremarkable, but the energy around her had shifted. Two other trainees stepped into the pit and began sparring, their movements sharper than before, less theatrical. Nobody wanted to be the next lesson. Avery watched without watching. Her mind wasn't on the fight in front of her. It was elsewhere, back to other sand, other heat, other hands around her throat that hadn't come with rules or whistles. Places where crowds didn't exist, where mistakes were paid for in blood, or names carved into metal. She rolled her neck slightly, testing the stiffness, then stilled. "Hey." The voice was cautious. She looked up to find one of the senior operators, standing a few feet away. He wasn't part of the instructional cadre, no clipboard, no whistle, but people made room for him without thinking. His uniform was worn in a way that couldn't be faked. His eyes had the flat clarity of someone who'd seen things go wrong and survived anyway. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes, sir." He studied her for a moment, gaze flicking to the mark on her neck, then back to her face. "You didn't panic?" "No, sir. Most do." She met his eyes. Panic doesn't help. A corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Where'd you say you learned that transition?" She hesitated. "Just a fraction. Work." She repeated. He nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something he'd already suspected. "You're not here by accident, are you?" "No, sir." Another pause. The sounds of the pit filtered back in breathing, grunts, boots striking sand, but they felt distant now, like background noise to a conversation happening on a different frequency. "Be careful," he said finally. "You make people nervous." Avery considered that. "I don't intend to. That's the problem," he replied, then stepped away. She returned her attention to the pit as the current spar ended. The instructor blew the whistle and scanned the group again. "You," he said, pointing at a broad-shouldered corporal with a reputation for discipline rather than showmanship. "You're up with her." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Subdued, curious, the corporal stepped forward, expression serious. He stopped a respectful distance from Avery and gave a small nod. "Ready? Yes," she replied, rising smoothly to her feet. They squared off in the pit, the space between them charged but controlled. The corporal didn't grin, he didn't posture. He settled into stance with care, eyes alert, breathing steady. The whistle blew. They circled each other slowly, testing range. The corporal feinted once, probing. Avery adjusted, matching him without effort. Their movements were quieter than the earlier bout, cleaner, less about dominance, more about reading intent. This time, when hands met, it wasn't brute force against endurance. It was skill against skill. The crowd leaned in again, but differently now, not hungry, attentive. Avery felt it. The scrutiny, the unspoken questions. "Who are you? Where did you come from? What else can you do?" She didn't answer them. She didn't need to, because the silence after the snap had done something important. It had stripped away assumptions, and in that quiet, something dangerous to complacency had been revealed. She wasn't surviving here. She was operating, and the people watching were just beginning to understand what that meant.